cap and trade? Is this a problem solver or another form of corruption? And what about this focusing on emissions rather than directing our energy toward the radical concepts of consuming less and shifting from petroleum to renewably generated electricity? Kris Nelder talks us through the smokescreen of carbon pricing while explaining that higher gasoline prices limits the growth of our needed renewable energy infrastructure. Plus, Obama's role in where the U.S. is headed with energy policy.
Cap and trade, fantasy or reality?
I used to believe that carbon pricing was a good way to go about incentivizing the energy transition we needed to make. I now think we're past the point where that would really be effective. I never supported cap and trade. I always thought it was a really dumb approach to the problem, and that instead of worrying about emissions, what comes out of the tailpipe, we should think about what we put into the engine. If you think about your primary fuel supply and you decarbonize that as quickly as you can, and you really focus on transitioning from fossil fuels, most importantly starting with petroleum, liquid fuels, and you imagine an endpoint where you're trying to run everything as that you possibly can on renewably generated electricity decades from now. You know, carbon pricing would have worked to incentivize that had we started it 20, 30 years ago. But right now, focusing on emissions doesn't really get you anywhere because it doesn't create enough net new renewable supply.
Right.
And it makes the cost of the fossil fuels that you burn go up at a time when you need them to be cheap in order to build the renewable energy infrastructure. I just think it's a really backwards approach to the problem, and cap and trade, I mean, is built to be corrupted. It's built to put more money into the pockets of the banks than to actually result in net new renewable energy supply. And other places where it's been tried, it's been corrupted. But we do know that if you incentivize things differently, if you do, for example, what they've done in Germany, in Japan, in Spain, in other parts of Denmark, you create a feed-in tariff. You say, we're going to, if the going price for electricity is 10 cents a kilowatt hour using fossil fuels, we'll pay you 30 cents a kilowatt hour or 40 cents a kilowatt hour, 3 or 4 times that, to produce renewable kilowatt hours from a solar system on your house or from a wind turbine on your property. And then it just becomes a financial no-brainer. Everybody puts them up, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of new supply. There was no capping, no trading, there was no bank getting rich off of doing this. It was, and it instantly results in new capacity. Now most of Europe has some sort of a feed-in tariff structure that is resulting in new kilowatt hours of renewable energy on the grid right now without any cap and trade stuff, and you wind up reducing the emissions.
Is anyone in the U.S. talking about a feed-in tariff?
Yeah, a few people are. I haven't really seen any strong support for it at a national level yet, but some of the states are doing it, and we've even had some municipalities within the states doing it. So I think it's starting to catch on, but as a policy tool, cap and trade, I think, was just misconceived from the beginning and would never work the way that they hoped it would, because we just shouldn't be thinking about emissions. We should be thinking about the primary fuels. You want to incentivize the solutions, not penalize the problem. You know, we've had every president all the way back to Jimmy Carter, even before that, really, talking about getting off of offshore oil, getting off of foreign oil, and our oil dependence, our dependence on imports has only gotten worse every single year, administration in, administration out, because we refuse to take that kind of a top-down approach and do what has to be done.
And what do you think Obama's role could be or could have been in this situation?
Oh, Obama had an enormous amount of political capital to spend when he came into office, and he wasted a good deal of it on health care. And as much as I wanted health care, I knew that that would be the case. I knew that it would be a waste because once it got through the political meat grinder, it would turn out to be a shadow of what you'd hoped it would be. and it would have spent a lot of political capital. Now that he's finally come around to energy, he's got far less to spend, and he's trying to do it again in a way that would, you know, be cooperative and bring everybody to the table and so on and so forth, when it's clear that not everybody wants to cooperate and come together on any solutions. They want what they want, and that's it. So I just think it's been very disappointing. What I had hoped he would do is follow through on his campaign rhetoric and come in with something like a New Deal for energy right out of the gate and say, here it is. We're going to go huge with rail. We're going to get cars off the road. We're going to transition this economy from fossil fuels to renewables. And we're going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on it. We're going to print that money if we have to. This is a question of national security. It's our top priority. It's absolutely urgent, and we have to do it. And I'm going to set us on a path to really make a substantial change in 25 years. You know, I think best case, the U.S. needs to eliminate 25% of its oil consumption in 25 years, 50% in 50 years. Well, that's a mighty, mighty tall order.
So if you were peak oil, what would you look like?